angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology, conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special Investigative Report.
The Vatican appears to think it knows something is coming toward planet Earth. What is it? Our special investigative report continues on Skywatch TV about the new book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me in studio, the best-selling authors of Exo Vaticana, Petrus Romanus, and On the Path of the Immortals, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. Gentlemen, our last discussion, kind of a whirlwind tour. We got as far as Mount Graham and your investigations that led to the Vatican's observatory on Mount Graham, the Vorg, and why a Christian church is involved in exploring outer space in the first place. And specifically, what is it about Mount Graham that the Vatican found so necessary to locate its observatory there?
It's a really interesting question, Derek. The astronaut Gordon Cooper, he said, you want to know about flying saucers and little green men? Ask the Vatican. They built an observatory up in Arizona, and that's what they're looking for. That's what Gordon Cooper said. Interestingly enough, up there, they really are looking for extraterrestrial life transparently. The most powerful telescope in the world is the Large Binocular Telescope. There's 3 instruments up there right now. They have plans for more. But the Large Binocular Telescope, its mission statement says that it's looking for other worlds. So it's not even a secret. The other instrument is the submillimeter radio telescope, which is a big satellite dish that can see into the spectrum that you can't see with the visual eye. and then the Vatican is the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, that for short. And that was basically the prototype of a new mirror technology they pioneered at the University of Arizona, and they got the very first one. And so that's the Vatican's telescope. And their primary mission right now, if you read on their website, a lot of times they're looking for dark matter. They're trying to prove the existence of dark matter. The reason why that's really intriguing to this subject is that they think that dark matter might actually be matter in a parallel universe. And the idea is that gravity waves can come through to our universe, but light can't. So we can't see it. That's why they call it dark. But we can detect the gravity of it, so we know something's there. And so they're looking for that. So transparently, even right on the surface, they're looking for parallel universes, other worlds. So that's not even hidden at all. But then, why did they force themselves up onto Mount Graham? They actually, as we mentioned before, they bypassed all the environmental laws, everything else. John McCain had it really just run right through Congress by fiat, and they got permission to build. And that's why the Indians are really upset. Now, why is that? Well, it's not just that it's a sacred site. They actually believe it's a portal. Now, this ties right into the parallel universe, other realm idea. And Tom actually talked to an Indian who mentioned that, right?
Well, what had happened was we go up to Mount Graham. The whole book, Exo Vaticana, is based on that experience going up there. We met with the Jesuit astronomer. They confirmed stuff for us. In fact, they told us stuff we didn't even expect to hear about how many times UFOs block deep space, filming operations, have to wait for these armadas to get out of the way so they can see past them. It's just extraordinary stuff. Yeah. And they're just talking about it like it's everyday thing. Like, sure, everybody knows there's billions of UFOs in space. Well, we didn't know that, right? We didn't expect these astronomers at the world's most powerful telescope to be saying this openly. So we thought that was extraordinary. So we come down off the mountain, and what happened was we went on Sid Roth's It's Supernatural. And on that program, I happened to say that I thought that the Apache, but there was some other indigenous Americans who also joined with environmentalists in a federal lawsuit to try to stop NASA Arizona State University, and the Vatican from building the observatory up there. Well, I thought, okay, the reason that the Apache in particular did that is because they were here ahead of everybody else, right? So it's what? It's like their forefathers and foremothers lived and died on the mountain, so it's like a graveyard. And I said that. I said, so it was holy ground, and they didn't want a bunch of machines in there disturbing the bones of their ancient ones and things like that. Well, then I get home and I get an email from a guy who was a member of the Apache Nation, and he wanted me to know that while what I had said was true, it wasn't the real picture. He said the main reason the Apache did not want them on Mount Graham, he said, is because Mount Graham is one of the 4 holiest mountains in all of the world for all American indigenous people. And it is, he said, because it is a doorway. It is a stargate. It's a portal. It's a strategic geographic location through which entities have entered into and exited Earth's reality since the dawn of time. Well, when he said that, you know, my brain went off the conspiracy meter about, oh, wait a minute, now maybe this is something deeper about why that mountain, of all mountains, the Vatican and NASA and everybody was fighting to be up there, because maybe there's something that we would consider to be metaphysical, something strange about the mountain. So then what happened? Chris Putnam and I, Exo Vaticana had already gone to the printer. We couldn't stop and add anything into it. We get this new information. That's what put us onto the third part of this investigation, a 4-year investigation that resulted in the book called On the Path of the Immortals, because we wanted to verify. First of all, since we're Christians and conservative Christians, is this just a bunch of New Age, Indian, you know, folklore or whatever? Or is there a biblical precedent for this? And frankly, it kind of revolutionized the way we could even look at the scripture, because when you start thinking this way, you notice in the Old Testament how often mountains are directly connected to doorways and gateways, both good and evil.
Yes.
So you've got Jacob, you know, seeing a specific place where he actually anoints it and says, here, there is a gate to the house of God, this location.
Bethel.
And it scared him, right?
Yeah.
Because he saw a spiral vortex or a spiral staircase, or what the King James calls a ladder, going up and down, and angels ascending and descending. But we also know that there's negative gateways on the earth. New Agers are often really attracted to these vortexes, like he went to Sedona to do an investigation. But we found that that too is a biblical idea. For instance, you had recently Dr. Mike Heiser was here talking about his book, The Unseen Realm, his research, one of the best ever written on the subject. And he pointed out how that there in where Aga Bashan, that Bashan and Caesarea Philippi at the base of Mount Hermon, the Hebrews believe that was the gateway to the underworld. But it's right there where Jesus stands and says, the gates of hell. Well, they knew exactly what he was saying, right? Shall not prevail against my church. And upon this rock,
I will build it.
I'm going to build my church, right? And a few days later, he goes up onto Mount Hermon with his disciples, and that's where he's transfigured. Like Dr. Heiser says, he is literally sticking a stick in the eye of those offspring of the Watchers who thought they were going to come to the earth and take dominion over the earth away from God. And that story goes on, and people can watch the, you know, the archived. But we started seeing that this was everywhere, this idea of gateways, doorways. So then what happened was we sent Chris, who went into Sedona with a film crew. I went to the Four Corners area of the United States, because we wanted to really follow up on, okay, if there's something about Mount Graham, if they believe that in the time before time, creation, basically the Creator came down over the mountain, but then soon there were these other things, fiery flying seraphim. They draw them, and they're ancient petroglyphs that are 1,000 years older than when Jesus walked in flesh. They show a spiral vortex, a reptilian being coming through, deceiving the Native American peoples. Then giants start swarming over the land. They cry out to the great God of heaven. He sends a universal flood. I mean, they're literally telling the Old Testament story from this side of the world.
The key, of course, and this is what this is all culminating in, and we'll get to this in just a moment, because I think we need to devote quite a bit of time on this as our special investigative report continues. What does this mean for today? And that's where we'll take this conversation in just a moment. First, want to tell you about the biggest giveaway of 2016 from Skywatch TV and Defender Publishing. Again, the book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist and the Vatican's Last Crusade. When you order the book, over $150 worth of product. We'll tell you about that, and we'll be back with Tom Horn and Chris Putnam right after this.
In 2012, they shocked the international community when they predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict 1 year in advance.
Breaking news, Pope Benedict XVI announces his resignation.
Yeah, it is the first time in centuries a pope has stepped down.
And I knew Pope Benedict was going to step down April 2012.
Leaving the world wondering just who their insider at the Vatican really was. In 2013, they exposed the mysteries of Mount Graham, the Lucifer device,
This first station is an instrument called Lucifer.
and the Vatican's secret plan for the arrival of an alien savior. Then in 2015, they took the world underground to uncover the truth behind the Native American legends of giants, the portals they once came through, and the most overlooked aspect of end times prophecy regarding their return. Now, in their final entry to the explosive 4-year investigation, internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam unveil their greatest discovery and make their most astonishing prediction yet, involving the imminent prophesied arrival of a mysterious final Roman emperor.
At that time, the prince of injustice, who will be called the Antichrist, will rise. He will be the son of perdition and the culmination of pride. He will deceive many, but when the Roman Empire will fall, then the Antichrist will show himself, and he will sit in the house of God in Jerusalem. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Thomas Horn, Chris Putnam. This will be the final entry and the greatest prediction yet, coming May 2016. The final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting May 31st, 2016. When you purchase the new book and final report from Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade, you'll receive the largest giveaway of 2016, an unprecedented value of over $200 in free books, DVDs, audio files, and a data DVD library with tens of thousands of pages of ancient literature no longer available, as well as movies, WikiLeaks files the government does not want you to see, and more for your library or to give away as gifts. Included in this biggest giveaway of 2016 are Chris Putnam's full-length DVD presentation, Astrobiology and the Vatican ET Connection, the new 5-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on the book, The Final Roman Emperor, plus 2 mystery books with a $40 value, and a data DVD library with thousands of pages of ancient literature, movies, and audio series for your library or to give away as gifts. And for the first several thousand customers while supplies last, you'll also receive Satan's Dirty Little Secret, the 2 demon spirits that all demons get their strength from, Satan, You Can't Have My Promises, the spiritual warfare guide to reclaim what's yours. What Happens When I Die, true stories of the afterlife and what they tell us about eternity. Becoming a Prayer Warrior, a guide to effective and powerful prayer. An unprecedented value of over $200 in never-before-offered free products. And the biggest giveaway of 2016, yours absolutely free when you purchase The Final Roman Emperor from skywatchtv.com for only $19.95 plus shipping, beginning May 31st. But be advised, this astonishing promotion is limited to first come, first serve while supplies last. So it's urgent, beginning May 31st, 2016. You place your order for the final book and biggest prediction yet in this 4-year investigation by internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade for only $19.95 plus shipping. This offer is on a limited time basis and will end without notification. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the updates in the countdown to the biggest giveaway of 2016. Order the new book by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam on May 31st to receive the unprecedented value of over $200 while supplies last. Free products limited to quantity on hand and may be replaced by products of equal value.
We mentioned some programs on Skywatch TV, the interview with Dr. Heiser as an example. You can find that online, and we want to make you aware of the exclusive online content that you'll find from Skywatch TV. You'll find links to it at the website, skywatchtv.com, the Skywatch TV YouTube channel, the Skywatch TV channel on Roku. To find those programs, again, log on to the website, skywatchtv.com. The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, the Vatican's Last Crusade. I guess the question is, if the Vatican is aware of these portals, these holy places, the high places, if you will, to use a biblical term, why are they relevant in 2016? What did you find in your research that points to the time in which we're living right now that led to the new book?
Well, Chris and I can both speak to this, but for me the key relevance is because we on Skywatch Television, we also like to talk about end times, biblical prophecy. And probably the most overlooked aspect of end times prophecy, you don't hear any of the prophecy scholars basically ever talking about this, is that these gateways that opened once before are predicted to open again. And this is something you just don't hear people talking about.
Right.
For instance, in Isaiah 13, when he's talking about the end times utter destruction of Babylon, and this is where a lot of this started. There was a gateway in Babylon too.
Right.
And it was built by Nimrod, who we believe is going to have a second coming too, the Antichrist, the spirit of that, right? But in Isaiah 13, right there in Babylon, it says, "Open the gates, ye ruler. I give command, and I bring them. Giants are coming to fulfill my wrath." And so there are places in Scripture, there's places in the apocryphal text, the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, that all foresaw this future moment in which these gateways of the earth are going to open again. And there will be an eruption of these gigantic beings. Now, for instance, in Revelation chapter 9, a mighty angel comes down from heaven. It says he has the keys to another gateway, right? To the bottomless pit. He opens it up, and these hybrid demonic things start coming up out of the ground. But again, Nimrod, Apollyon, Osiris, it says they have a king over them down there in this pit, whose name is Abaddon, or who's known in the Greek tongue, Apollyon, Apollo. And so that was probably the biggest revelation of the book On the Path of the Immortals, is the historical evidence that this happened once before, and the biblical prophetic evidence that it's also predicted to happen again in the end times.
These texts, and there are hints at this throughout the Bible. You mentioned Isaiah 13. I know in the weekly Bible study that Sharon and I do, we stumbled across Abaddon is mentioned as an entity, and the dead are held in Abaddon. So How do we interpret this? I mean, we also see a clue here with the medium of Endor, where King Saul goes to consult with a medium to bring back the spirit of Samuel, and he comes up from the earth, and she says, I see an Elohim arising from the earth, a spirit arising from the earth. Are these the kind of gateways we're looking at, where something that is being held right now in a sort of holding tank, it will be loosed upon the earth?
I think so. And Derek, we've mentioned Dr. Michael Heiser a few times, and I just have to mention him again because a lot of these things are kind of hidden by our translations. People who translate from the Hebrew into the English or the Greek into the English sometimes, don't really get it, I think. And, it's almost like the Bible's been censored to me sometimes when I read it. And Dr. Heiser, being an ancient languages scholar, points a lot of that out. And, one of the things that really fascinated me right from the beginning is that, there's a story in the Garden of Eden about a serpent beguiling Eve, and deceiving her. On the surface, it almost seems absurd because snakes don't have vocal cords. They can't talk. So what was it, telepathy or what? Was this a talking snake that's there? But if you read Dr. Heiser's understanding of the Hebrew language, you see that this word nakash, in Hebrew, an adjective can be substantivized, meaning it can be turned into a noun. Now, if that's the case, it could literally mean shining one. And so Dr. Heiser would say Eve was deceived by a luminescent serpentine being. Now it starts sounding more like what people call aliens or something like that.
Right, reptilians.
And it gets really interesting. And then you see these fiery flying serpents in the book of Isaiah. What's that?
Right.
What is that? Well, the same word is seraphim.
The seraphim,
right,
yeah.
that are flying around singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. So you see holy seraphim, yet in our translations in Isaiah, it doesn't use the word seraphim. Seraphim's a transliteration of Hebrew, right? But when you get later, and it's in an evil context, in the judgment of Babylon, they call them fiery flying serpents, but it's the exact same term. They just translated it differently.
And these seem to be exactly what the indigenous people were describing as coming through a portal. I mean, if you look at the myth, and it's very interesting because, like Mount Graham again, they describe in the time before time, the great creator comes down. And what's interesting is they describe him as a bearded man, and the Apache don't have any facial hair.
That's right.
So they describe him as a bearded man. He sounds like the book of Revelation description of the ancient one. But they say he's in a silvery disc. Now, of course, the guys that subscribe to like the ancient astronaut theory might jump on that and say, ha, see, the aliens came and created us. And maybe that's why the Vatican's up there talking about aliens. But what they miss is what the ancient Jewish rabbis call the Merkavim. This is what Ezekiel saw, the wheel in the middle of the wheel, which is described as circular, it's shiny.
But also alive, that these are living beings.
That it's a living being,
yes.
But when we look at it and we don't know what it is, we simply describe it. I think Josh Peck at one time talked to you about, is it the Ophanim?
Yes.
These angelic presences that are described as circular, they're moving back and forth from the throne of God. So when you think of that, that sounds like what the Apache are describing, this literal flying vehicle. The Creator comes down, but then it says not long after that, this doorway opened again, and that's when they said this man that wasn't really a man, he was a serpent. He was the king of the watchers. In fact, the Dead Sea Scrolls refers to him. I think his name in the Dead Sea Scrolls is Makrisha, but it describes him as being very dark, very serpent-like, like a viper, very frightening with piercing eyes, right? Well, this is what the indigenous people drew on their petroglyphs, and they said he started teaching, and this brings us full circle. He started teaching the Indians to go down into their underground kivas and to practice what he called witchcraft, sorcery, pharmakia is how the Bible describes it, for the purposes of opening doorways into the underworld, to put themselves into contact with what was down there. So bring it full circle back to him talking about dark matter. Here's CERN. They're working with the Vatican up on the top of Mount Graham to try to make contact with dark matter. CERN's trying to open a doorway. They're trying to film gravitons escaping into a parallel universe. But go back to Revelation 9, when this gate of the earth opens up and these things come up out of the earth. How does Revelation 9 end? The people that are being tormented by those plagues, what does it say? And yet they repented not of their sorcery.
Yes.
And this is the Greek word pharmakia. Pharmakia is simply an effort to try to bypass what God has sealed off from us, to put ourselves into contact with something that he has put behind a gateway that he says is forbidden for us to make contact with it. So we use drugs, we use whatever we have to do to put ourselves into a altered mental state to make contact with what is there. So we have a rich corroboration in American history that says the same thing that happened in the Middle East when Moses was writing the Pentateuch and there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, the same thing was happening here. The same story. It ends with the flood. It's all the same story. It's a corroboration of Scripture.
And it's the same story that we hear about from the days of Enoch, when the watchers came down at Mount Hermon, again, which led Jesus to put the stick in the supernatural eye with the transfiguration on Mount Hermon, which is phenomenal. In fact, bringing Mike Heiser back into the conversation again, was listening to a program that he recorded here not long ago, in which he said that there was a period during the early Christian church where there were those who felt among the early Christians that Enoch should have been given as much weight as Moses. Now, of course, Enoch is not canonical, but it does seem to parallel what you learned in your research about what the Native Americans in the American Southwest believe about Mount Graham. These other holy spots around the planet, we know of Mount Hermon. There was a mount in northern Syria near the border of Turkey today called Mount Akra, but in the day Mount Zavan, which was supposed to be the location of Baal's palace. But we also know that all over the planet there are artificial cosmic mountains. Babylon, the step pyramids of Mesoamerica. We see pyramids all over the planet. Was this just an attempt by mankind as we spread across the planet after the Tower of Babel to try to bring mankind into contact with these entities? In other words, is what the Vatican trying to do now, apparently, just a high-tech version of building the Tower of Babel?
Perhaps that's the case. Mount Graham is a portal, and they're up there for that reason. It would lead to that conclusion, would it not? They call it a very rare ecosystem. If you go out there, it's the mountain. You're in a desert when you start. As you go up the mountain, you start to see lush forests and completely different environment. So it's almost a unique environment.
Well, they call it a sky island, and it very much reminds you of what Dr. Heiser was saying about the mountains were considered the garden of God, right?
Was a garden, but also a mountain.
Place where the gods would exist, and that very much is that same kind of an environment.
Well, we've still only scratched the surface, but our special investigative report will continue. The new book, again, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Final Crusade, will bring this into present day in our next program as we continue. And we thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.
Angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology, conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special Investigative Report.
They accurately predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict, something that happened in hundreds and hundreds of years. And now they're making an even bolder prediction for what lies ahead in 2016. Welcome to Skywatch TV. This is our multi-part special investigative report about the forthcoming book by the international best-selling authors Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. The book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. We welcome back to the program Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. The Cumae Sibyl. I always thought that the Cumae Sibyl was just a mythological creature. Frankly, I was not even aware until recently when I began preparing for these interviews that she was an historic person. And not only that, that Jewish theologians and early church fathers actually took the Cumae Sibyl's prophecy seriously.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a pagan prophetess, right?
Yes.
Of pagan Rome who delivered prophecies. You go to the temple and offer a sacrifice or whatever. And, they had books of prophecies and sayings of the Sibyls. And there was actually more than one Sibyl. As the Roman Empire spread, all the capital cities would have their own version of the Sibyl. And it turns out there was one even in Jerusalem at the time. And so, they collected all of these prophecies. So you have the Sibylline oracles, the Sibylline books, and we have copies of a lot of these. Now, a lot of them became somewhat Christianized, and the Jews also used them. And so some scholars will say that they were changed by Christians and altered and things of that nature, but sometimes maybe not so, because we see something like Justin Martyr in the 2nd century quoting the Sibyl in his apologetic to the pagan Romans, saying, look, even your Sibyl was monotheistic in these passages. And it, really interesting that he would do that. So you have a lot of that going on, and you find a lot of these prophecies, our only source of it is from the early Christian church, from their quotations, because the original books have been lost. Now, how does this all connect to our investigation? Well, we were really looking into this idea that the Muslims have of the Mahdi, who's going to make the whole world Muslim. Mm-hmm. And this is, they expect a regular man to be born. He's not Jesus, right? He's a human, but he's supposed to make the whole world become Muslim. Now, how's that going to happen?
Yeah, and just to give people a sense of the time scale involved here, Muhammad didn't found the religion until the 7th century.
That's right.
So we're talking about 6 centuries between the time of the Sibyls and the Sibylline oracles,
right,
and Muhammad.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does that connect, right? Well, there was a piece of literature called the Apocalypse of Methodius, and that was really popular in the 600s in Syria. Okay, and it was written in Syriac, in the Syrian language.
Okay,
and it became a mainstay of the early Christian church in that time, and it probably was for 1,000 years. And people believed that it was scripture, basically. It turns out now we don't think that he wrote it. It's pseudepigrapha is what we call it now, because there's just some things that are giveaways. But in that piece of literature, there's a character they call the Great Roman Emperor, okay? And really, we believe that not only the Catholics believe that this Great Roman Emperor is going to make the whole world Catholic. All right. And at the same time, this is in the 600s, and you think about historically what's going on. The Quran has just been composed, and Islam is beginning to promulgate across the land.
And of course, the Western Roman Empire had fallen in the 5th century. 476 was when the German Magister Militum Odoacer basically deposed the last emperor. So we don't need you anymore.
Right.
I'm going to be the first king of Italy. But Rome at that time still existed. It was just the Eastern Roman Empire centered on what is now Turkey, Byzantium.
That's right. And so, they have all these prophecies about Constantinople, and which doesn't exist anymore. Now it's Istanbul, right? Because the Ottoman Empire conquered it, and which kind of makes some of ISIS's predictions seem a little incoherent in that they want to conquer Constantinople, which isn't there anymore. This character, the Great Roman Emperor, featured in this apocalypse. What we find in Muslim eschatology is a lot of it is more a response to Christians than it is original. I mean, you see the same characters as the book of Revelation. You have the Dajjal, which is like the Antichrist. You have Jesus. They call him Isa. And, you know, it's just like they took the book of Revelation and they Islamified it, okay? And so where does the Mahdi come from? Because he's not in the Quran.
That's true.
And I can't find anything where Muhammad, you can really prove that Muhammad said anything about a Mahdi. And so scholars have looked at this, and I read a lot of books and papers about it, and you know, it really, really, really looks like the Mahdi is just a response to the great Roman emperor, which came from this apocalypse of Methodius. So it's basically an anti-apologetic.
Well, I guess that's not too surprising because the Quran, and I don't want to deviate from the topic of the book here, but the Quran is essentially just a corrupted version of the holy texts given to Jews and Christians. But setting that aside, what then? How does this relate to where we are today? I mean, where does this lead, and what does it lead you to conclude about what we can expect for the rest of 2016 and the years ahead?
Well, as I was discovering all this, I was thinking, how am I going to tie all this together with our work? And why are we doing this? How does this all fit together? Well, what I discovered is this idea of the great Roman emperor wasn't original either. Whoever wrote the Apocalypse of Methodius copied it from the Sibylline prophecies. So it goes way back into pagan Rome. Now we start getting a really interesting connection because Tom Horn, in his book Apollyon Rising and then Zenith 2016, connected a prophecy of the Sibyl to the Great Seal of the United States. And this idea that perhaps the Antichrist would be a great leader from the United States.
Well, and also there is a deeper mystery here that once again Chris uncovered. It's kind of like in Petrus Romanus when Chris found what had been written by Rene Thibault 64 some years ago that kind of put us on this trail that ultimately wound up with us making our prediction. This time around, he's back there in antiquity again. We can't keep this guy in the modern world, right? And he's digging around, and what he discovers is, up until probably the 1600s, this idea of the great Roman emperor. So what do we mean by that? The Roman Catholics believed that there would come a time in which there would be basically a Catholic king. The Holy Roman Pope would become king of the earth or something like that. That's why many of the Protestant reformers, they're looking at this thinking this is going to be the Antichrist, right? But those were borrowed from prophecies that originated with the Cumae Sibyl, with these Roman, and then later the Greeks had their own version of the Sibyl. You know, Apostle Paul cast a demon out of the young woman in the New Testament. Well, she was a Sibylline, a Pythoness. She was a prophetess for the god Apollo. But if you go to the Vatican City today and go inside the Sistine Chapel, you have the great paintings by Michelangelo, right? But why, right there among all of the Old Testament prophets, is the Sibyl? I mean, the Cumae Sibyl, what in the world is she doing being honored among all the Old Testament prophets there inside the Vatican? But then you come over to the United States of America, and you start noticing these similarities, that the way Rome is laid out, you have a dome facing an obelisk, which is an ancient symbol, which was used actually, and it was made most famous by the Egyptians who used it for raising the spirit of Osiris from the underworld to become incarnate in their pharaoh so that it would have divine representation. But again, a divine king. The whole prophecy about the final Roman Empire plays off of this idea of a final divine king, a God incarnate who is going to lead the world in the end of times, what the New Testament would call the Antichrist, right? The son of perdition, the Nimrod reborn. So you have the generator at the Vatican to make it happen, the dome, the obelisk. You even have the Cumae Sibyl glorified inside their most famous chapel, whose prophecy says this entity is coming. coming. You come over to the United States, and what do you find? You have the dome at the capital city.
Right.
The dome facing the obelisk. And what do you have on the Great Seal of the United States of America but the prophecies that are derived from the Cumae Sibyl? And what does she say? That at the end of time, this great king, it's going to be Apollo, she says, reborn on the earth at the end of time, and he is going to become the king of the new world order. So you have the most ancient, deeply occultic, powerful symbols combined with a primary source for these prophecies, which say that at the end of time, who the New Testament identifies as the Antichrist, is going to become the king of the final world order. Well, in this book, therefore, based on that general idea, we make the biggest predictions. We did accurately predict the resignation of Pope Benedict a year in advance. That pales by comparison to the detailed roadmap that we provide in this book for the very near future, and we literally detail how each event is going to happen, how it's going to unfold, and ultimately we believe it's going to lead to Armageddon.
And you can get a hint from the cover art as to what may be expected here. You see the Islamic State flag there on the obelisk there at St. Peter's Square. You've got two characters, one Roman Catholic, one Muslim, both occupying essentially the same position in their prophecies, one drawn from the other. We'll talk about that as our special investigative report into the book, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade continues right after this.
In 2012, they shocked the international community when they predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict 1 year in advance.
Breaking news, Pope Benedict XVI announces his resignation.
Yeah, it is the first time in centuries a pope has stepped down.
And I knew Pope Benedict was going to step down April 2012.
Leaving the world wondering just who their insider at the Vatican really was. In 2013, they exposed the mysteries of Mount Graham, the Lucifer device,
This first station is an instrument called Lucifer.
and the Vatican's secret plan for the arrival of an alien savior. Then in 2015, they took the world underground to uncover the truth behind the Native American legends of giants, the portals they once came through, and the most overlooked aspect of end times prophecy regarding their return. Now, in their final entry to the explosive 4-year investigation, internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam unveil their greatest discovery and make their most astonishing prediction yet, involving the imminent prophesied arrival of a mysterious final Roman emperor.
At that time, the prince of injustice, who will be called the Antichrist, will rise. He will be the son of perdition and the culmination of pride. He will deceive many, but when the Roman Empire will fall, then the Antichrist will show himself, and he will sit in the house of God in Jerusalem. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Thomas Horn, Chris Putnam. This will be the final entry and the greatest prediction yet, coming May 2016. The final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting May 31st, 2016. When you purchase the new book and final report from Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade, you'll receive the largest giveaway of 2016, an unprecedented value of over $200 in free books, DVDs, audio files, and a data DVD library with tens of thousands of pages of ancient literature no longer available, as well as movies, WikiLeaks files the government does not want you to see, and more for your library or to give away as gifts. Included in this biggest giveaway of 2016 are Chris Putnam's full-length DVD presentation, Astrobiology and the Vatican ET Connection, the new 5-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on the book, The Final Roman Emperor, plus 2 mystery books with a $40 value, and a data DVD library with thousands of pages of ancient literature, movies, and audio series for your library or to give away as gifts. And for the first several thousand customers while supplies last, you'll also receive Satan's Dirty Little Secret, the 2 demon spirits that all demons get their strength from. Satan, You Can't Have My Promises, the spiritual warfare guide to reclaim what's yours. What Happens When I Die, true stories of the afterlife and what they tell us about eternity. Becoming a Prayer Warrior, a guide to effective and powerful prayer. An unprecedented value of over $200 in never-before-offered free products. And the biggest giveaway of 2016, yours absolutely free when you purchase The Final Roman Emperor from SkywatchTV.com for only $19.95 plus shipping, beginning May 31st. But be advised, this astonishing promotion is limited to first come, first served while supplies last. So it's urgent, beginning May 31st, 2016. You place your order for the final book and biggest prediction yet in this 4-year investigation by internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade for only $19.95 plus shipping. This offer is on a limited time basis and will end without notification. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the updates in the countdown to the biggest giveaway of 2016. Order the new book by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam on May 31st to receive the unprecedented value of over $200 while supplies last. Free products limited to quantity on hand and may be replaced by products of equal value.
We've referenced an interview that we did with Tom Horn about his book, Zenith 2016. I encourage you to go back to our online content at skywatchtv.com. You'll find the YouTube channel there. You'll also find the Skywatch TV channel on Roku there. Look for the interview about the book, Zenith 2016, which gets more in-depth into the Kume Sybil and its links through the Freemasons to the Great Seal of the U.S. and what that actually prophesies, I should say. But Chris, the Islamic world essentially cribbed the character of the Mahdi from this pseudepigraphal prophecy, the Apocalypse of Methodius. So it sounds to me as though we've got these 2 characters that are both, neither one are sent by God, that both presume to be God's instrument of justice and judgment on earth that will lead to a final conflict. Do I read that right?
I think so. I think it's a perfect setup for Catholics who believe in this great Roman emperor or final Catholic king or however they want to put it, and the Muslims who believe in the Mahdi. It's basically the same literary character. It's a perfect setup for the Antichrist to fulfill the role in the minds of both people and bring it all together into a one-world religion. I mean, we're told in the book of Revelation that the beast will be given authority over all nations, right? And so we expect that to happen. And what do we see? You know, we see the world, we see globalism occurring right now. And, you know, in analyzing ISIS or the Islamic State, you know, a lot of people think maybe the Antichrist will be a Muslim. I have a hard time accepting that the whole world's going to want to become Muslim. But I do see what we call the Hegelian dialectic, the idea that you can't really move people real radically over to one side, but you can push them a little bit by offering an antithesis, meaning, you know, you have a thesis, antithesis, synthesis is the way it works. Now, what is ISIS? What is the Islamic State? I think it's the perfect antithesis to Western values. I mean, Americans don't want to give up their freedom. They don't want to give up their guns, right? But 9/11, all of a sudden, we have the Patriot Act. We have our rights being taken away, and people are happy about it because they think they feel safer, right?
Right.
And now it takes hours to get through the airport. It's the perfect antithesis to freedom. And so what does that do? It moves the world a step closer to totalitarian control, to a new world order.
How much significance do we give the Pope Francis talking about the justification for a holy war?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting. That's really what got the book idea started when Tom first emailed me about doing this project, is that Pope Francis was out in public using very specific language that if you read Catholic doctrine, they have a just war doctrine. What constitutes a just war, and what those requirements are. And I'd taken an ethics class, so I was familiar with these ideas. And yeah, the language that Pope Francis is using is like quoted directly from that. And he's talking about just cause and all these things that are kind of buzzwords.
Genocide and different words. And we do, Chris wrote 2 or 3 chapters in this book that really kind of spells out how we think our prediction is going to how it's going to roll out, and just war is going to be one of those causes. Basically, the ISIS is going to create a trigger event. We go into what we think is going to happen that is then going to cause the Pope to call for just war to be enacted, that would then allow the nations of the world, kind of like the first Iraq war where Bush got together and had a coalition army came together. But in this case, we're talking about the Vatican condoning that war under just war, which for the Muslims will be seen as a crusade.
Right.
They'll see this as the flag of Rome, and they'll see it as the fulfillment of their ancient hadith in which Muhammad allegedly said that at the end of time they're going to go to war against the army of Rome. So we think that's literally going to play out. But one thing I would just jump in here and add real quickly to what you're saying, Chris, is that look at what Pope Francis himself has been doing specifically. Just war is one of those things. He's out there. There's other leaders for the Vatican Church too. They've talked to the UN. They've even said this is based on church doctrine, which is a reference to just war. But look at what he's saying on the kind of the esoteric side of things. You've got the Muslims on this side saying we're going to kill the Pope. They made a movie showing their tanks coming down against the Colosseum. They show their flag flying. The reason why it's on the front of our book cover too, on the obelisk there in the middle of St. Peter's Square. But look at how Pope Francis has responded to this. First of all, he says that what's going on with ISIS, he said to the Christian community, what's happening with ISIS means you should prepare yourself for the end times. Yeah. He is literally connecting this to end of the world theology. But he also, as Chris pointed out, one of the first things he did when he became Pope was he dedicated the world to the Fatima apparition, the Our Lady of Fatima. But what does Fatima describe? The third secret of Fatima, the Pope's walking through the large city. Many people believe that's the Vatican. These ISIS-like fighters run in, they blow up everybody, they kill all the people that are assembled, they kill the Pope, right? He also knows that he is the final Pope in the prophecy of the popes. And how does that end? And after all these things, the city of Rome is destroyed. He's made friends with the priests that are what they call them, the ones that study the Zohar. And in the Zohar, it talks about how after 2013, the city of Rome is going to be destroyed. This is a 700-year-old prophecy. The Messiah will present himself, and shortly thereafter. And right now, what are the rabbis doing? The rabbis are saying, prepare for the Messiah. He's here. So there's something that's going on just beneath the surface that we believe is going to roll out over the next 48 months. And we're very specific about how we think that is going to play out. And we think the Pope is positioning himself right now. And the radical Islamists, they're ready. They're saying, bring it on, right?
Yeah.
It's what they want.
So they're looking for this character, the Mahdi, who will lead them to in battle against the forces of Christendom.
That's right.
Yeah. How do we as Christians then process all of this? Because we're looking at what is clearly whether we want to admit it or not as Americans, or certainly our politicians don't want to say this, but it is a religious war between the forces of Christendom, in a sense, under the banner of the Vatican, and the forces of Islam, at least as it's imagined by the by the Islamic State. How do we, as Christians who believe in the inerrancy of Bible prophecy, try to process all of this? Where do we discern the truth amongst all of these competing lies?
Well, Derek, one thing I did in this book is I tried to analyze all this from a different perspective than what you're hearing on the news. What you hear on the news is a very worldly, geopolitical, human analysis. And it's accurate most of the time, and they have good reasons for what they're saying. But what I'm trying to do is pull back from that and take what I call a long play perspective, in that having a supernatural worldview, believing that there are angels, immortals, that are playing out these ideas and things, fulfilling these Bible prophecies, pushing us toward this new world order. You don't see it happening in one human lifetime all the time, okay? These things are immortal beings. So if they have a strategy, it's occurring over centuries, not during your lifetime. So you might not notice it, right? But if you look at, from the early 20th century to now and see how things are pushing toward globalism, toward this idea of a new world order, it's amazing. And, you can look at ISIS more as a tool to push us toward that than them actually being the Antichrist or something like that. That's the kind of perspective I'm looking at. And the thing that was really fascinating, I don't know about this exactly, I can't say it's true or not, but there's a letter supposedly written to Albert Pike by an Italian Freemason named Mazzini.
Mazzini, yeah.
And in that letter, allegedly, they predict that they're going to use 3 world wars to accomplish this new world order. And the first 2 are described so accurately, it's uncanny. Now, what's interesting is there's a Catholic priest who wrote a book. It was copyrighted like 1920, and he mentions this letter. And it was before the Second World War. And it really described the forces, the Jews fighting, being persecuted by the Nazis. It's really accurate. And if it's true, it's astounding. But the thing that's most astounding is that the Third World War is the Muslims against the Christians.
A spoiler alert for our audience, there is a guest chapter in this book that was written by Derek Gilbert, and it really has to do with how this final Roman emperor, who the New Testament would call the Antichrist, is going to be accepted by the Muslims as their Mahdi, by the Jews as their Messiah, and by the Christians perhaps as the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what it comes down to, is that an improper understanding of prophecy can lead us all into error. And that's why it's important to understand what is lying ahead. The final Roman emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's last crusade, the biggest giveaway of 2016 from Defender Publishing and Skywatch TV. Tom Horn, Chris Putnam, excellent work, and an honor to be even mentioned in between the covers of this book with you gentlemen. Get your copy and share it with friends, because it is a roadmap of what is to come. And we thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.